guys, welcome back to this podcast called A Bad Game of Hide and Seek. Last week we talked about this dark place that we can sometimes fall into and experience, and how it's okay to feel pain because it's part of being human. And then we talked about this love and this thing of what it is. We talked about how we should be looking for it everywhere. And I gave you a little homework assignment of challenging to try to find where you are seeing this love, and, or if you want to use another word, God sightings in your life. I would love for you to comment below and say what your God sightings and where you're finding this love as. It's really important to make sure that you are finding that love in your life. Now that we have this nice base of where to start with, we're going to start working through this question that is the main point. How do we love in the midst of all this pain? So last one I ended with, God is love. And that's a really strong statement, right? If God is love and he loves us, why is there even pain? I mean, why did that loved person even pass away? Why did that trauma event happen to me? Why didn't he stop that one event from happening? You know what? He created this whole entire earth. Why is there even pain on this earth? Why do bad things happen? Why did he even create that stupid tree in this perfect land for someone to know good and evil and for Adam and Eve to sin? Because he knew they were going to. So why did he even make the tree? These are just a few questions that Christians and non-Christians ask. As a growing Christian, you cannot ask these questions about your faith, right? I mean, that's bad. That means you're questioning it. That is completely wrong. It is completely normal to have doubts and questions about your faith, because that is how you grow. Imagine if you went to school and you never asked any questions. Like, you don't understand how your math teacher got that math answer, but you don't ask. You just kind of sit there and don't ask. Or you're reading a book and you're like, what the heck is the teacher even talking about? I don't even remember that character being in there. But you don't ask. You would never grow in your knowledge because you have to ask questions. And that's the same with your walk. But what if you're mad at him? So not only is it just asking questions, but now you have like this ball of energy of anger, right? Where you're mad at him. All those above questions have left you frustrated. And then you're wondering, is this even a good God? Because pain isn't good, right? It makes you feel negative. We so often blame God for something going wrong or not going the way that we want it to, but is it really his fault? I'll give you a hint. The answer is no. Someone once explained it to me this way. Darkness is the absence of light, just as evil is the absence of God. We are all sinners, and that's because God gave us this free will, starting with that stupid tree that I mentioned of good and evil. Adam and Eve could have chosen not to sin, but they chose to sin. When we sin, we are pulling ourselves away from God. God sent Jesus to pull us out of that hiding spot that I mentioned last week, so we can walk with him. Last week we talked about Naomi, and she was telling her daughters-in-law to go back home, and life's all hunky-dory for you guys, just go and I'll be fine, move on, basically. But one of her daughters-in-law, Ruth, said something to her that was a little bit different than what she wanted to hear. In chapter 1, verse 16, Ruth says this, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God." Ruth was like, I'm sorry, Naomi, but I'm not going to just keep letting you hide into your falling place. I mean, you're family, and I don't want you to do that. If we wanted to relate it to us nowadays, it's like whenever your parents know you're playing hooky and you don't want to go to school, and you like, "Oh, Mom, I'm sick." And, my mom would always come up, rip the covers off, and she'd be like, "You don't look sick to me. You have to go to school. I know you're faking it." That is what Jesus is doing. He's trying to pull us out of our hiding spot. In Hebrews chapter 4, verse 14, it says, "Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has gone through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet without sin." If only we would listen to what he's saying here. Jesus is like, I didn't sin, but experienced the pain as if I did sin for you. I died for you to have a relationship with our loving Father. Why are you not taking me up on that offer? Even when we feel like we are alone or want to be alone, we're not. The Holy Spirit is with us if we choose it to be. But also, God is supposed to be love, right? In the beginning, we talked about how God is love. But wouldn't he care about this pain that I'm going through? Now, we know that he's not the cause of pain. That's sin. So why isn't he stopping it then? Why isn't he stopping those bad things from happening? Last week, we talked about Jacob, right? And he was really upset. He felt like, his kids were dying. He lost 2 of them, and then they were trying to take a third one away. And in Genesis chapter 42, verse 36, it says at the end, "Everything is against me." That's how he ended it. Everything is against me. Do you ever feel like God is not helping you in this situation you are going through? But believe it or not, he actually is. Just not the way you wanted him to. In John chapter 11, Lazarus is dying, which is Mary's brother. And Jesus found out that Lazarus was sick. He had to do something. In chapter 11, verse 6, it says this, "Yet when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. Then he said to his disciples, 'Let us go back to Judea.' 'But Rabbi,' they said, 'a short while ago the Jews tried to stone you, and yet you are going back there?' Jesus answered, 'Are there not 12 hours of daylight? A man who walks by day will not stumble, for he sees by this world's light.'" What the heck? First you read that and it really doesn't make sense. You're like, okay, so there's 12 hours of daylight. That makes sense, okay. What does that have to do about being stoned? I still wouldn't want to go back, right? Jesus is trying to say that how the Lord is light, right? So he's not afraid because God has a plan. He's trusting God with his life right now. But also think about it on another way is when someone wants to sin and do something, are they going to do it right in the open? No, they're going to do it at a dark hidden place. And they don't want to be caught. So when Jesus is saying that there's 12 hours of daylight and that he doesn't have to worry because he's not going to stumble, he's not going to worry because 1, he's walking with God, which is light, and 2, most people don't really do stoning or sinning right in the open like that. It continues in verse 10 saying this, "It is when he walks by night that he stumbles, for he has no light." After he had said this, he went on to them. "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going to go there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he's asleep, he will get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and for your sake, I'm glad I wasn't there, so that you may believe. But then let us go to him." In the scripture, he just told his disciples that he's going to go to Judea. And they said they're going to go with him, right? Let's jump into verse 32 and see what happens once they get there. It says in verse 32, when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would have not died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. It doesn't say that Jesus shed a little tear. It says that he wept. He cried. He felt the pain and the grief of losing Lazarus. In verse 36, it says this. Then the Jews said to him, "See how he loved him." So you're saying because he loved Lazarus, he felt pain? Wouldn't those be the opposite? Which goes back to last podcast, how pain and love work together. Remember that this pain that you are feeling is because you love that person or you love that football team so much that you're sad about how things ended up. Jesus didn't want Lazarus to die. The death impacted him and others. As it says, it impacted Mary and the Jews. This is a great reminder that the pain that we are feeling and grief, God feels it too. We are his children, so he loves us so much, as a father should, that he doesn't want us to be in pain. In verse 37, it continues by saying, "But some of them said, 'Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?'" The people who were literally in Bible times living with Jesus were second-guessing him. They were questioning him. Like, hey, you saved that one person. You helped him be able to see, but you're not willing to save Lazarus? So why didn't God save Lazarus? It's the same reason why God didn't save Jesus. There was a bigger purpose for their life. In 2 Corinthians 12, Paul is talking about this big thorn in his life that he is facing. In verse 7, it says this, "To keep me from becoming conceited because of these surpassingly great revelations, there was given me a thorn in my flesh, a messenger from Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecution, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am made strong.'" When you might feel like God is against you, really? He let this happen for a reason, because he loves you. He wants you to become the best person you are meant to be. Maybe this happened to make you stronger, or maybe it was for you to stop leaning on that one person and lean on him. Only he knows the reason for things to happen the way that they do. But we can ask. In those weak moments, that is when the devil attacks us. That is when we need to turn to God. If you are feeling negative feelings toward God, or want to know the reason because maybe you feel like there isn't one, I suggest that you think about today's lesson and be honest with him. Tell God how you're feeling. In James chapter 1, verse 5, It says, "If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you." So basically, it's saying to ask God those questions. Come to God where you are. He'll meet you where you are. God really does love us for who we are and wants you to choose a relationship with Him. God is seeking a relationship with you. This week, I challenge you to show God how much you love Him. Maybe it's praying to God where you're at, or asking Him those questions that you really would like the answers to. Or maybe it's worshiping Him on the way to work. Maybe it's just being the best person you can be by showing love to others and opening that door. Whatever you are going to try doing, you are stepping out of your hiding place and you're walking with God somewhere new. Join me next week to learn how to love yourself as we just learned how to love God. Thank you for joining episode 2 of A Bad Game of Hide and Seek.